Ada Lovelace, the woman who saw the future of computing a century too soon. In the early Victorian era, when women were expected to be decorative and domestic, a young mathematician peered into the future and saw something no one else could envision. She saw computers creating music, designing graphics, and shaping scientific research, all a century before the first electronic computer was built. This is the story of Augusta Ada King, Countess of Lovelace, better known today as Ada Lovelace, the woman who wrote what many consider the world's first computer program in 1843. But her contribution goes far beyond that single achievement. Ada was the first person to truly understand the transformative potential of computing, foreseeing applications that wouldn't become reality until well into the 20th century. As the daughter of the famous poet Lord Byron and the mathematically inclined Anne Isabella Milbank, Ada was born into contradiction. Her father, the romantic, scandalous Byron, abandoned the family when Ada was just 5 weeks old, never to return. Her mother, determined to prevent any hint of Byron's volatile madness from surfacing in her daughter, arranged an intense education focusing on mathematics and logic, subjects considered highly unusual for women at the time. Ada's life was shaped by this strange inheritance: poetic imagination from the father she never knew, and analytical thinking from the mother who raised her. Rather than seeing these as opposing forces, Ada would eventually unite them in what she called poetical science, a blend of creativity and calculation that would define her unique approach to mathematics. At age 17, Ada was introduced to London society, where she quickly distinguished herself not for her beauty or marriageability, but for her intellect. At one gathering in 1833, she met Charles Babbage, a mathematician and inventor 24 years her senior. Babbage had created plans for what he called the difference engine, an elaborate mechanical calculator. When Ada visited his workshop to see a prototype, she was immediately fascinated. "The difference engine turns out to be a much more wonderful thing than I expected," she wrote afterward. "I see now very clearly the manner in which it does its work." What could have been a passing fascination blossomed into an intellectual partnership when Babbage began work on a more ambitious device, the Analytical Engine. Unlike any machine before it, the Analytical Engine would be programmable, capable of performing different operations based on instructions fed into it using punched cards, adapting a technique from jacquard looms used in textile production. This was not just a calculator, but a general-purpose computer in mechanical form. While Babbage focused on the machinery, Ada saw something more profound. In 1843, she was asked to translate an Italian mathematician's article about the Analytical Engine. Rather than simply translating, she expanded it with extensive notes that ended up being 3 times longer than the original article. In these notes, now known as Notes by the Translator, Ada included a detailed algorithm for calculating Bernoulli numbers, a complex mathematical sequence. This algorithm is widely regarded as the first computer program ever written. But what made her work truly revolutionary wasn't just the algorithm itself, but her insights about the machine's potential. Let's pause to consider how extraordinary this was. In 1843, when electricity was barely understood, when the telegraph was cutting-edge technology, Ada was describing computational concepts that wouldn't be implemented for another century. It's as if someone in Leonardo da Vinci's time had written a detailed manual for flying a jet aircraft. Ada wrote, "The Analytical Engine has no pretensions whatever to originate anything. It can do whatever we know how to order it to perform. This precise understanding of the relationship between programmer and machine, that computers follow in its instructions rather than generate ideas, remains fundamental to computer science today." But she went further. Ada suggested that the Analytical Engine could be used to compose music, produce graphics, and support scientific research. She wrote, "The engine might compose elaborate and scientific pieces of music, of any degree of complexity or extent." This was her most astonishing leap of insight. Ada understood that if numbers could represent not just quantities but entities of any kind, musical notes, letters, symbols, images, then computers could manipulate more than just mathematical data. This concept of abstraction, that computers could work with symbols representing anything, not just numbers, is central to modern computing. Unfortunately, the Analytical Engine was never built during Babbage's lifetime. The technology of the Victorian era simply couldn't produce the precision engineering required, and funding for such an ambitious project wasn't forthcoming. But Ada's ideas lived on in her published notes. Ada's life outside her mathematical work was equally complex. She married William King, who later became the Earl of Lovelace, and had 3 children. She moved in elite social circles, struggled with health issues, and reportedly developed problematic gambling habits. In letters, she revealed a personality that defied easy categorization, by turns analytical, passionate, ambitious, and self-doubting. She died young, at just 36, from uterine cancer, the same age at which her father had died. She requested burial next to the father she never knew, creating a poetic symmetry to her life story. For nearly a century after her death, Ada's contributions faded into obscurity. It wasn't until the mid-20th century, as electronic computers began to transform society, that her work was rediscovered. In 1953, more than 100 years after her death, computer pioneers like Alan Turing began to recognize her as a kindred spirit who had glimpsed the future of computing before anyone else. B.V. Bowden's 1953 book, Faster Than Thought, a symposium on digital computing machines, republished Ada's notes, introducing her to a new generation. Later, the U.S. Department of Defense would name its computer language Ada in her honor, cementing her place in computing history. Today, Ada Lovelace is celebrated as a pioneer who broke barriers in multiple dimensions, as a woman in science, as a visionary who saw beyond the technology of her time, and as someone who understood that the future of computing would involve creativity as well as calculation. So what can we learn from Ada Lovelace's extraordinary story? First, her life reminds us that innovation often happens at the intersection of disciplines. Ada's poetical science approach, combining imagination with mathematical rigor, allowed her to see possibilities that others missed. In an age of increasing specialization, her cross-disciplinary thinking feels remarkably modern. Second, her story highlights the importance of mentorship and collaboration. While Ada possessed remarkable talents, her partnership with Babbage was crucial to her work. She had access to his ideas and machines, and in turn, she provided insights that he might never have reached alone. Third, Ada's life demonstrates that progress isn't always linear. Her ideas about computing were so far ahead of their time that they couldn't be fully implemented during her lifetime. The technology needed to catch up with her vision. This suggests that today's seemingly impossible ideas might simply be waiting for the right conditions to become reality. Finally, Ada's story reveals how easily contributions, especially from women and other marginalized groups, can be erased from history. For decades, her work was overshadowed by Babbage's, her achievements attributed to him or dismissed as exaggerations. The rediscovery of her contributions reminds us to examine whose stories we tell and whose we overlook. Each year, on the second Tuesday of October, we celebrate Ada Lovelace Day, an international celebration of women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's a fitting tribute to a woman who, despite the constraints of her era, dared to imagine a future where machines could extend human thought and creativity. As we navigate our increasingly digital world, it's worth remembering that a Victorian countess saw it coming nearly 2 centuries ago. In Ada's own words, "The more I study, the more insatiable do I feel my genius for it to be." Her genius indeed was seeing a future that would take generations to arrive. Thank you for watching this exploration of Ada Lovelace's remarkable life and legacy. If you found this video informative, please crawl I. Please like, subscribe, and share to help others discover this pioneering figure in computing history. And remember, Ada's example the next time someone tells you your ideas are too far ahead of their time. Sometimes that's exactly where they need to be.